Hi, Zizaran here with another league starter for the 3.24 Necropolis League. This is going to be Ice Nova of Frostbolts. And this is another Goratha bait build. For those that have been enjoying the last collabs with Goratha, they've all been pretty insane, a lot of the time setting the meta. This is a Archmage build. And I will say this build does come with some warnings. This is not as new player friendly as some of the other builds that we posted out. And that's because crafting mana gear and things like that can be a little bit weird. And we're going to be using Arcanist brand for the clear. So if you're completely new to Path of Exile and this sounds scary, then we do have a lot of other league starters. But it looks insanely strong. Goratha was just showing me some footage. Let's hear from Goratha about how the build plays and how it does bosses.
So the playstyle is going to depend on whether or not you want to use Arcanist brand for mapping or self-cast Frostbolt. The general idea is you cast Frostbolts, and then on the Frostbolts, you're casting Ice Nova of Frostbolts. With Arcanist Brand, the playstyle is you throw out Arcanist Brand, the Arcanist Brand will cast Frostbolt, and they'll return really fast, because the way return proj works with Arcanist Brand is you have a limited distance for which the projectile can travel. Because of the Arcanist Brand line that says projectiles with support skills have a max range. This works really well for return proj, because it returns faster, basically. Their Frostbolts are on top of the target more likely, or more often. So I prefer the Frostbolt of Arcanist Brand a lot more for single target, and I was actually clearing with it, and it felt pretty good to me for clearing. A lot of people prefer to self-cast it for clearing though, but you're always going to be using Arcanist Brand for single target. This is the boss single target damage setup. Now, like I said, the playstyle is you cast the Frostbolts, however you're casting them, and then you spam Ice Nova. That's the general playstyle. We have a couple buttons we can press that make the build a lot stronger. Arcane Cloak. This is the big one. This is a lot of your defense and a lot of offense as well. I recommend you self-cast this, but you can technically automate it if you want to be super lazy. I am personally going to self-cast it. Then we have Sigil, Power, and Frost Shield. These aren't really required. You can either self-cast these or automate them, or maybe not even use them. I am going to use them. They're very strong. It's just a lot of extra buttons to be clicking. I think a lot of people will probably try to automate them somehow. You can do that by the new Automation Gem, or Katava's Thirst, or Focus Helmet. There's a couple ways to do it. If I use them, I probably will self-cast them again. It's a lot of extra buttons, but they are very, very strong. Frost Shield is a bit annoying as well if you automate it, because you have to stand in the Frost Shield. So if you like automate it and it casts it behind you where you're running already, it's like a bit wonky. That one could be worth the self-casting. Now, I think I probably will use Call to Arms during Cry, but if I need gem slots, this will probably be the first thing I drop. And then the Curse. If you're cursing Punishment, this is another thing you have to cast. That's kind of the general playstyle. The build is really fun to map with. I was enjoying it quite a bit. Some people might think it's a bit slow, but it actually felt pretty good to me.
So as you see, super fun, very different from anything else. A scary thing about this is crafting mana gear can be pretty daunting, getting high rolls, especially on weapons. Like the essences only affect gear, and this is a good way that you can force mana on armorization gear, but can be a little bit tricky to craft. So that should be interesting to see. But this looks so strong. Like some of the things that Goratha was showing was just face tanking Drox. And gotta remember, this is weaker than how Archmage should be in the next patch, because you'll have so much more mana because it uses less mana this patch. So that's why you're gonna see a lot of people going Archmage. But again, a little bit scary for new players. It is very different than a super handholdy build. If this build guide helps you have a great league start, please consider subscribing. It helps me and my team out a lot. So, as normal, we're using Path of Building. If you're not familiar with how Path of Building works, we do have a video going over that. It's a very important tool that we use a lot. And Goratha's put a lot of effort here into going through different skill trees so that it's very clear when you're putting skill points, so you don't have to worry too much about what you're taking at what point. And also the what Ascendancy point you take at what time will also be in the different trees. And then you have early mapping in Urbalab, and then you have an endgame tree. And a very cool thing about this build is this is actually what Goratha himself is league starting. All the things he's been playing lately have been very spicy, very strong, and it's very cool that he's always making like very different builds. So if that's what you're looking for, this might be a great build for you. And you'll be able to ask him loads of questions and see how the build evolves as he's playing it. And it looks like he has pretty solid damage. And because of Mind Over Matter, you have so much raw HP. You basically have like probably over 10k life fairly early in the build. You have so much energy shield, you have so much life, and the mana protects the life. So just a large amount of raw HP. If you go here to the skill section, you can see that we have the early game with Rolling Magma as normal. And Goratha was looking for some different ways to level than just Armageddon Brand and Cremation. Now, if you're really familiar with that, you absolutely can level with Armor Brand, Cremation, and Desecrate. A lot of people love leveling like that, but if you're getting kind of bored of that, he was leveling with Firestorm with Archmage, so literally leveling with an actual Archmage build, and he was doing it with the old Archmage gem, which is weaker than the one we're going to have, and I mean, the Deresto damage here in the campaign speaks for himself. This is on a fresh playthrough, and the Claire looks okay, so it looks like it could be a pretty fun way to level. Then here we have when you're switching over to Ice Nova of Frostbolts, but obviously that's the thing. You do need the Transfigured Gem, so you do want to grind that out. You can either do Normal Lab or Merc Lab. Obviously farming Merc Lab is okay for getting a bunch of gear as well, and you do get more options on the Divine Font. And then here we have Mapping and Urbalab and the full endgame setup. There are Awakened Gems and stuff like that included. Obviously, there's no Awakened Archmage. If you go to the notes as well, there are loads of explanations of things that could be easy to fuck up for the build, tips for leveling, and definitely read through that before you go through it. Gear sets, early on, very standard. Just life and resist. All you want to focus on early is get resist capped, and remember that you can craft resist with the crafting bench on white gear. They don't even need to be blue or yellow. Then Act 5 gear is like getting slightly stronger. Act 10. And there's some examples of unique gear that you can use if this is your second or third character and you want a bit of a extra help, like the minus mana cost on a Praxis or freeze immunity on a Dream Fragment. And then we have mapping gear and endgame gear. And Goratha, the unique items in this build, are these necessary or do we have any rare items that we can use instead?
So the only really necessary item endgame would probably be Foible, and that's like super endgame. There is a really good option for helmet, which is Mind Spiral. But yeah, the unique items are not required at all. You could basically just use all rare gear and be completely fine. There's a lot of good options though, like Singularity for your weapon and stuff like that. I would recommend, actually, for the Energized Armor, just pick up every Crimson Jewel you find and disavow them, because that'll be very strong early on for getting a lot of armor.
This is also a really good tip for making some extra currency early on, because people are playing things like Ice Bear Totems and Explosive Arrow and Artillery Ballista, so the Rain of Splinters does end up selling for a decent amount early on. Unnatural Instinct is quite rare, and so is Ancestral Vision. And then we have an example of a Watcher's Eye here with the different good stats that would be very strong for the build. So, Goratha, on this build, what are some easy mistakes people can make?
You definitely want to get as much mana on your gear as possible. It can be easy to not get mana in your gear, but that is your damage and your defense at the same time. So make sure you do that. A preference, I'll say, it's not really a mistake, but if you want to self-cast Frostbolt, I would play around with that. I personally enjoyed the Arcanist Brand playstyle, and that felt good to me. But you can definitely self-cast it as well for clearing. The single target will always be Arcanist Brand though, because that's just a lot more Frostbolts on top of the target you're attacking, so it'll be a lot more single target.
What about stun immune and stuff like that?
So you can get Unwavering. If you really have an issue with stun immunity, we can take Unwavering because we don't have any evasion really anyways. I'm personally probably not going to do that, because you do have a couple of evasion pieces and it feels like a little bit of a waste. There's going to be a new evasion, or a new ES mastery, which will give you some more like stun threshold or whatever. You could definitely go for that too if it's a problem. I will probably just go for Brine King myself. I think Brine King's probably good enough.
How come you went for a cold skill instead of like a very traditional lightning skill?
I think the meta will probably end up being Ball Lightning, and like a new player might think that a lightning skill makes more sense for this type of build. But actually, being a cold skill is a big advantage, especially because we have no avoidance. Being able to freeze and chill everything makes it so we're not really taking damage very much while mapping. And yeah, it's a big defensive layer to have like base cold damage. While we're still doing mostly lightning damage, it'll be really impactful for mapping.
So there you have it. And remember, Goratha is league starting this himself. So if you have any questions or you want to see any differences or changes he makes live, check him out. He's going to be streaming loads on the launch. Amazing content creator, and I love doing collabs with him. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Go give him a lot of love, and thank you guys so much for watching. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.